But now let me come back to the survivors who lived through this terrible camp, some for as many as 12 years. Camp started in 1933, and it was 1945 when we delivered it. Faith, hope, and love kept them going. Their religious faith, there were Protestants, Catholics, Greek and Russian Orthodox, and Jews, only about 16% were Jewish actually. So their faith served them well. So did hope that they would be rescued, and love as they tried to support each other. They shared what little food they had, clothes, food, and news from the BBC on their clandestine radios. They knew we were coming, even if we didn't know the camp was there. It was so cold that some died each night, and their friends would stand their bodies up at the morning roll call because rations were handed out by the numbers counted every day. I returned to Dachau with about 100 American veterans in 1995, with about 10 in 2005, and this year I was the only one there as the president of the 20th Armored Division Veterans and representing all 30,000 of us who had liberated Dachau. At the 2005 commemoration, we met two very special French survivors, and in October a year ago, my wife Susie and I traveled to France as their guests. At the 1995 ceremony, I had met Marcel Fonfred, an extremely bright and active veteran of the French resistance, who now lives in Saint-Ismier, a suburb of Grenoble in the French Alps. His story is remarkable. During the Christmas holiday in 1943, he went home from his school to see his family in Paris. His father was a well-known resistance leader sought by the Nazis. Unfortunately, the Germans picked up Marcel instead. His father escaped and later became an important cog in the underground, helping Allied pilots escape to Portugal. Marcel himself was a key link in the same chain, so the Nazis figured that out, even after interrogating and torturing him. For the next 2 years, Marcel was moved from prison to prison, forced to perform hard labor on the way amid unbelievable conditions. He finally arrived in Dachau on one of these death trains that I described, where a few people did get off alive. The Nazis had two ideas in mind. One is they wanted to hide what was happening in all the other camps, so they thought they could bring all the prisoners from all the other camps into Dachau. And the other idea was a crazy one. They thought they could do a sort of a guerrilla war based in Bavaria and stop the Nazis that way. So their idea was to bring everybody into Dachau. Many of my friend Marcel's friends had died along the way when their SS guards, the SS of the Nazi guards, would not even bury their bodies. After arriving at the Dachau train station about 5 miles from the camp, they had to walk on foot, and they were chased there by dogs who bit all those who fell along the way. Once there, my friend Marcel was admitted to the infirmary, which saved him from the death march, in which the few remaining ambulatory prisoners were forced to walk toward Munich and thence up to the Alps. Fortunately, several of our American units caught up with the death march after the liberation of Dachau and took care of the poor, wretched prisoners. Another friend had a similar but happier experience. He was on one of the trains en route to Dachau when it came to a stop in a gully between two tunnels. Then they looked at, there were no engine left, and they were sitting there as sitting ducks as the Allied and German artillery exchanged shots over the train. And what they were really afraid of was that our pilots would bomb them thinking it was a German troop train, but they pulled together a tricolor flag out of their clothes and put it on top of the freight car, and that showed the pilots that they were French prisoners and not German troops. Later, my friend and a Polish prisoner walked back along the tracks, evading enemy lines until they came to an American camp. They persuaded the Americans to take a Sherman tank, hook it to the car holding the French prisoners, and pull it back to their camp. There they all rested for a month or so, slowly returning to health. Another close friend I'd met at the 60th anniversary, Jean-Claude Cotet, had a similarly dramatic story to tell about his father, who was named Joachim, who died in 2002. He lived in the small village of Haber-Poche, which is now a very pretty ski resort in the French Alps, an hour east of Geneva. In 1943, 40 youngsters, almost all in their teens, were working in the French resistance. Figuring that the Germans were 25 miles away, the group decided to get together on Christmas Eve for a party in the village chateau. Tragically, a Vichy traitor had infiltrated their ranks and tipped off the Germans, who arrived drunk, murdered 35 of the young men, and then burned down the chateau. 5 of them feigned death and escaped, but were arrested the next day. And I was asked to lay a wreath on this memorial last year. Joachim Cote was one of the 5 survivors who was captured the next day. He was sent to a series of concentration camps, performing hard labor under atrocious conditions. All 4 of his comrades died en route, leaving him as the sole survivor of the massacre to make it to Dachau. At a ceremony held in my honor last year at the mayor's office, I met several other veterans with equally grim stories. One was Fernand Klein, who was decorated for his role in the resistance. He escaped 5 times from the Nazis before ending up in Dachau. The French prisoners huddled together as the remaining Nazis tried to hide the evidence of their atrocities by driving them past Munich up into the Alps. As the Americans got closer, the German guards began to discard their uniforms and put on civilian clothes, which the prisoners had been pushing in these rude carts. This was up past to Munich toward the Alps. As soon as most of the guards disappeared, the French prisoners all left the march and occupied local homes until we arrived. A Dachau anniversary many years later is a unique affair. Each former prisoner has a story to tell. Many returned hoping to find old cellmates. This seldom happened, but many made new friends, all bound together by the hardships they'd endured. One French friend told me how he and 15 others were ordered to destroy food supplies by dumping them in the stream around the camp. All of these people that were ordered to do that were starving and dying of hunger. Suddenly they jumped and killed one guard, and they hid in the woods until they were rescued a few days later by us. On April 29th this year, the exact anniversary of the liberation, I was invited to speak to a group of some 30 survivors at the entrance to Dachau, where the infamous sign, Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free, is still implanted over the entry of the doorway. The sign is particularly nasty and ironic when applied to the prisoners who were forced to do hard labor. These returning survivors were French, Dutch, Danes, and Israelis, so I spoke in English and French. This was followed by a solemn ceremony where I placed a wreath below the plaque honoring our division. After this ceremony, we were all invited to the museum auditorium for a unique and rather bizarre event. It happened that during the 4 months preceding the liberation, 7 pregnant women were kept in one room, and they were not killed because they were cooking for the guards. Their husbands had been executed in December 44, but the wives were left as they were cooking for the Nazis. During the next 4 months, they all gave birth in the same room, sharing milk and other bare essentials. When they were liberated, they all disappeared until 2 young German ladies decided to track them down. The 7 babies, as they were described, were all brought back to Dachau for this anniversary, and they're all 65 years old. The leader, a well-known Toronto doctor whom I got to know quite well, was amazed that he had been found. There was a Brazilian businessman who could only speak Portuguese. The others, all women, were from Eastern Europe, only speaking Polish, Romanian, or Czech. Everyone told his or her stories for the film that's going to be sold to pay for the expenses. Early on Sunday, May 2nd this year, we all attended a ecumenical service in the large Catholic chapel at the far end of the camp, where there are Protestant, Jewish, Catholic, and Russian churches. The Protestant chaplain gave the sermon in German, which I don't understand, but I was very surprised to hear my name mentioned. The pastor later gave me an English version in which he said, quote, Alan Lukens and 30,000 other American soldiers shared their provisions with 35,000 prisoners in the same way that Jesus had fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. I was a little taken back by this, but I was the only American the pastor had ever met since I had spoken to him and the Catholic priest the day before. After the service, we gathered in an enormous tent holding some 1,500 people, mostly survivors and their families, plus numerous delegations from all over Europe. President Horst Kohler of Germany attended for the first time at Dachau, making an inspiring speech. His very presence made a major statement. He abhorred the Nazi past, stressing that the new Germany was part and parcel of the democratic Europe. Then came my turn as the liberator, speaking for the 30,000 members of the 7th Army Forces. I pointed out that Dachau had changed from a symbol of infamy to one of hope. The motto after liberation was never again, jamais plus, nie wieder, Boski Nakoda. I told the survivors that it was a terrible shock when we arrived 65 years ago to see how much they had suffered, but that we liberators would never forget the excitement and warm welcome they had shown at our arrival. In a message which President Obama sent to me to read at the ceremony, he said, and I quote, "In the face of atrocities that defy understanding, Dachau survivors left a legacy of hope and moral triumph. Their liberators left one of courage, human decency, and compassion. Today, let us recommit to raising our voices against an enemy born of intolerance, indifference, and injustice, and endeavor to build a world where all may live together in peace." End quote. So thank you all for giving me this unique opportunity to tell you what happened at Dachau, where faith, hope, and love carried the survivors through a dreadful ordeal. We should not forget this lesson as all of us work together for a better world. Thank you.